Thursday get together here on Birds 365, 5 weeks away from the NFL draft. We're not going to ask him that much about the draft. Maybe a question or two today. We'll get him back on later when we get a little bit closer to the draft. Always good talking about not only Eagles, but the entire National Football League with Mike Tanier from FootballOutsiders.com. They keeping you busy this offseason, Mr. Tanier.
We are nothing but busy this offseason. But I'll tell you, you guys didn't tell me it was a black pullover shirt.
No, it always is. But that's, the green screen.
That makes sense.
You always got to wear it dark. So
Gotcha.
something there. So I go with the Johnny Cash look every day. But Mike, I'll start with one of your favorite topics, the great Aaron Rodgers. Maybe a little ayahuasca tea. Who's got the leverage here? The Jets or the Packers? Because, everybody back and forth. I don't think the Packers have much leverage. They're not going to pay the guy, whatever it is, $60 million. So what has taken this so long?
The Jets don't have a lot of leverage either, because if they don't do this, they do not have a quarterback. They're going into the season where they have built for, I guess, a deep playoff run. I think that's where they think they're at. And you can't go into this saying, well, you know what, that fizzled out. Sorry, guys, we're going to go grab Carson Wentz. You can't do that if you're Joe Douglas. So,
you just scared Jody.
What's happening here is they all have time until the draft. Everybody's got time until the draft. Nobody's in the facilities. Nobody's worried about somebody showing up for OTAs. So neither Gutekunst or Douglas has to make the move here. So they can play a little bit of a staring contest. I think when we get to that draft and they're looking at that first round pick the Jets have, the 2 second-round picks the Jets have, and they say, what's it going to take? That's where the potential that the Packers say, all right, we call your bluff. We're going to pay him all this money. And the Jets say, okay, well, we're going to draft a guy whether you like him or not. That's where both sides are going to say this is untenable, and that's when they're going to pull the trigger.
All right, let's say the deal gets worked out, whatever it is, a 1 or 2 twos, future, whatever the payment is, It's not outrageous. The Packers don't rob the Jets. The Jets don't hoodwink the Packers. The compensation's the compensation. Here's my concern from a Jet perspective. Is this guy committed to the New York Jets? I know he came out of the darkness after a ayahuasca bath and said, I want to be a New York Jet, but is he truly committed to going in and at age 40 going, yeah, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to rally the troops. I'm going to be the leader. We know how talented he is, but is he just going to connect with his teammates and the coaching staff and be the leader that the Jets needed QB?
The guy who said he was 90% sure he was retired before he went into his
in the darkness. 90%.
Into the darkness.
Yeah.
Before he went goth, the guy who has gone out of his way not to connect with his coaches since about 2014 or so, the guy who's gone out of his way to only connect with a very select group of his teammates. Yeah, we all see this. We all see the same thing. Is this guy? He's going to come in. He's going to want to play his favorites. The Jets are bringing his favorites in. They brought Lazard in. They brought in Hackett. They're moving things around to accommodate him. And the likelihood that he's coming in and I hate to say like a cash grab, but the likelihood where he's coming in and at the first sign of things not being the way he likes it, he's going to be like, oh well, we have to have a talk about this. That's brutally high. That is brutally high for the Jets. And, this is obviously something I think comes in at the ownership level. I don't think Joe Douglas hates the idea of bringing Aaron Rodgers in, but I think he's already realizing this is a bit of a Faustian bargain. And I'll say this, the Vegas line right now for the Jets is 9.5. The house is built in the idea that Rodgers is there, and they're building him at 9.5.
Oh, yeah.
You are doing this to win 10 games. This is everything not to win the Super Bowl, not to be better than the Bills up there with the Chiefs, to win 10 games with a 40-year-old quarterback. I would be very nervous if I were the Jets. I'd be very nervous about if I were a Jets fan.
Is there any value to that? I mean, we talk about it all the time, and you guys do so much great analytical work. And there is this, I think it's more of a modern thought, certainly, that, as you mentioned, 10 wins with a 40-year-old quarterback, what's that really worth versus 3 wins and getting a ton of draft capital, sort of like what Chicago has done.
Right.
On the other hand, you have the Jets and their history, as Jody can tell you, and in deep pain. They've been this way. They haven't been improving. So how much value is there to win in 10 games with a 40-year-old quarterback? Because he will win 10 games.
Yeah. And it's tricky because if you ask Jet fans, they'll say, we'll take it. It's been a 12-year playoff drought. We will take this and run with it. And it's like, well, if that makes the fans happy, that's something. There's a difference between, what you've got in Joe Douglas is a 4th-year, 5th-year GM, and Robert Saleh, who's a 3rd-year coach, saying we need to show progress. 10 wins shows progress. Nobody gets fired. Nobody has to put the house up for sale. There's something logical to doing that. The question is, are you just delaying things a year? I'll tell you right now, if they'd gone out and gotten Derek Carr, who's a lesser quarterback, but would come in with a highly motivated to continue his career thing, they'd probably be at about 9.5 wins right now. We'd be talking about 10 wins, but we'd also be talking about somebody who's more affordable, somebody who gives them 2 or 3 years to grow. It's just very sketchy to say. It's one thing to say, hey, look, we show progress. We're a playoff team now. And we're a playoff team, but our quarterback is 41, and we have to move heaven and earth to compensate him. 2 very different things to balance if you're the Jets.
And since we went quarterback, I'm staying quarterback with you, Mike, but I'm moving it here to Philadelphia. But it's not an analytic you can look up at Football Outsiders. You can use it to buttress your opinion, but I need an opinion on just goodwill.
Yes.
The Eagles are going to try and get a contract extension done with Jalen Hurts. Everybody knows it. Everybody's talking about it. At some point, it will outweigh everything else the Eagles are doing. And I don't think it's just going to come together the way that some other people do. I think this is going to drag on. I don't think you're getting a Burrow deal done anywhere. You don't think you're getting a Herbert deal done. And Lamar Jackson, Mike Tanier's getting almost as much free agent attention as Lamar Jackson is these days. So nobody's moving the needle on the quarterbacks and the new structure of contracts in the NFL. Is there a date that you would have in mind where you go, all right, now this is going to start to be a problem because they haven't gotten anything done, because they haven't moved any closer, that the fan base is going to start to go, why didn't we get that his teammates, and this is probably the biggest one, we're going to see our first pay the man tweet.
Yeah.
You got to grasp on the timeline on how this works as to when it, right now it's, they'll get it done. At some point, that's not going to be the case. How does it work over the course of the next couple months?
That's right. It is March 23rd. It is March 23rd right now. So it's like, why isn't this deal done? That's you're still like
not there yet, but we're gonna get there at some point, Mike.
We'll get there. Let's look at where we are in July as camp approaches, and let's look at the trio of quarterbacks, because I think one of the factors in terms of the urgency is this a Jalen Hurts situation, or is this a 3rd year entering 4th year quarterback situation where everyone can see around the league that like 3 different teams are trying to converge on this? So I think the urgency will heat up closer to the summer. I think they're going to get free agency. They're going to get the draft, look at the budget, look at the long-term budget, and start making offers. And my gut tells me the Eagles will get in ahead of the Chargers and the Bengals, in part because Howie works more quickly and with more intentionality than those 2 teams, and because Lurie has more money than those 2 teams.
They don't. Cleveland, Cincinnati doesn't have the money to put in escrow to pay Joe Burrow.
Right?
They don't. They have a problem.
They have a problem. They just paid Orlando Brown, so that's putting some money in escrow. They've got a plan to play Jamar Chase. That's putting some money in escrow. They lost some of their safeties and some of their guys already because they can't put it together. I don't think the Chargers are in that boat anymore, but a couple of years ago, the Chargers.
Yeah, a couple of years ago they were.
Yeah. And overlaid on all of this is I don't think any of these agents are going to ask for a Deshaun Watson guarantee. But the GMs are going to try and create a guarantee structure. I think everyone's going to be looking to ring a $200 million bell. And I think it's going to be onus is on Howie to be like, well, you know what? The official guarantee is actually going to be 130. I don't know, pull a number in there. But then there's a roster bonus 2024 that kicks in for 2025. All that kind of bells and whistles type of thing to get that. So that's going to take time. I don't think we're going to see urgency, though, until we're getting closer to camp and everybody's got to walk through that door.
Yeah.
And then
I've told Jody, if you go back to Carson Wentz, June 1st is a big day.
Yes.
They signed Carson Wentz, I think it was June 6th, because the Eagles get things done early. Most teams, though, do what Mike just said, beginning of camp. Everybody goes on vacation. People don't believe. They don't do anything. They're on vacation like everybody else. They're not talking. They're not doing anything. Then they get back in advance of camp. All right, let's get stuff done.
Yeah.
That happened with Landon Dickerson. We had that discussion. Draft picks don't hold out anymore. I said they're going to sign him. They're going to sign him. They're going to sign him. But they didn't get it done before. They got it done after they got back from vacation. So there are certain days on the NFL calendar that are a big deal. June 1st, one of them.
Yes.
Start of training camp, another. I think you're right. We'll see how it shakes out, though. Mike, I do want to sort of bring it both together, what we were talking about, and Howie Roseman. I talk about this a lot. Jeffrey Lurie and Jimmy Kempski asked Howie this, our buddy, before the Super Bowl. You know, how much is it a luxury that you don't have to? You just talked about Joe Douglas. He's got a GM for his job, so to speak. You know, he's got to show improvement. That's why you go after a 40-year-old quarterback.
Right.
Howie's so entrenched, he gets to do things other general managers don't get to do. Right. How big of an advantage do you think that is for the Eagles?
I think it's demonstrated what a big advantage it is when this team went from the Super Bowl to the pits to the Super Bowl again in the course of 6 seasons. There have been whole swaths of franchises who've been in rebuilding mode that entire time. And the Eagles built, collapsed, and built again in that time. You look at teams like the Detroit Lions, the Cleveland Browns, the Jets, obviously. You can go to these other teams. Teams like the Steelers, who are really well-run organizations, have been like, oh, we're like 9 and 10 wins every year for that entire period and didn't have the highs. So that's an advantage. I say, though, it's only really an advantage as long as Howie is working in concert with the coaching staff, because the continuity at the general manager position and the ability to like make these bold cross-court pass type trades, acquisitions only works if the coaches are saying, we're the ones who need these players. This is what this is our type. This is our need. This is our long-term expectation. So you kind of had it with Peterson, then you lost it with Peterson, and now you seem to have it with Sirianni. So that's the strength. If it starts being friction, and I think it was friction a couple of times there along the way over the last 12 years, then that becomes the problem.
All right, Mike, need your take on this one because it became a talking point here in town, as it should have, because he showed up. Bijan Robinson is a potential Eagle draft pick.
Oh, heavens.
Now, we continue to state that the Eagles don't take running backs. Well, history's history. Facts are facts. They just haven't. Right. But the Eagles also like to be cutting edge. John was just talking about everybody's doing voidable years now. Howie might have been the first, but everybody in the league is doing it and putting the. So the Eagles like setting the agenda for the league too and being ahead of the curve. Drafting a running back with the number 10 pick in a draft would certainly be resetting the curve again. Hasn't been done since Saquon Barkley. Any chance Eagles to go down that road? Just when we think, oh, it'll never happen, Howie does a switcheroo again and says, yeah, we'll dictate terms for the entire league.
No. No. Roseman is analytics oriented. He's well aware of what happens if you take a running back that high. Even in terms of the fifth-year option you would have to put in front of that running back if he had a couple of good years. Now, if Bijan is there at about 30, where the Eagles pick 30?
30, yeah, 30.
Then there's a logic there. And what happens is the entire compensation package differs. And, of course, it's different. He's your second first-round pick probably, and you went out and you got one of these edges or a defensive tackle or just the best available athlete. So I don't see it happening. Bijan is remarkable because I do a lot of, around the country radio. Fans want Bijan.
Oh, yeah. Well, they always want the skill player, the sexy player. The Eagles are built on, Jody and I were talking about it early in the show, Mike, the core four, Jason Kelce.
Yes.
Offensive line, Lane Johnson, offensive line, Brandon Graham, defensive line, Fletcher Cox, defensive line.
Yes.
Everybody still wants the running back, the receiver.
Right.
It doesn't register.
Right. I talking to Falcons fans, like the Falcons are going to bring in Bijan Robinson. Like the Falcons are going to get a running back? You don't have anything. You just not have anything, but you actually have okay running backs. You just want a guy that you watched at Texas, and he is amazing. But I do not see the Eagles bringing Bijan, long story short.
Yeah. All right. League as a whole. who have made the biggest improvements? Everybody, the Bears had $6 zillion in cap space and totally tore it down. So obviously they've gotten some good players, improved. Although I don't know about paying $92 million to all ball linebackers, but
Right.
they obviously improved talent wise. But I look at Detroit and I look at Dallas. Am I wrong or am I right, Mike Tanier?
You are absolutely right. And it is bad news for Eagles fans that the Cowboys really have improved. And, I think we know what the Eagles are trying to do is trying to prevent like a complete collapse of this team. And that's what they've been working on. Yeah, it's like, we got Slay back, got Bradberry back, you get Graham back, Kelsey unretires, and it's like, well, there's no way you can keep Hargrave in that situation, etc. So they're holding serve. The Cowboys are legitimately improving. Okay, Stephon Gilmore is a legitimate improvement at cornerback. It gives them bookend corners. Brandon Cooks on a short deal when his head's in the game with a quarterback who can throw, not Davis Mills, but Dak Prescott, is a heck of a guy to be your wide receiver too. And it looks like the Cowboys have built in part to be able to counter the Eagles with these guys. It's like, okay, we can pass rush, we can cover. We have guys now who can cover both Smitty and A.J. Brown, and we've got more weapons on offense. You mentioned the Lions also. Lions were another team with lots of money, lots of draft picks, just kind of bought a secondary.
Yeah.
They just bought a second. C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They brought in
Cam Sutton from Pittsburgh.
Emmanuel Mosley, when healthy, heck of a player.
Yeah.
The other team I would add is the Browns have done a very good job adding players, and I got to pull it up real quick. They just made a trade yesterday for Elijah Moore. They needed sort of a guy who can gobble up passes over the middle. They were terrible at defensive tackle. They went out and they got Dalvin Tomlinson, who's a pretty good player, Tristan Hill, who's like a space eater. They've done a lot to do what the Browns need to do, which is they better win soon because they're paying $6 billion to this guy at quarterback.
Let me ask you about Brandon Cooks. I know this is not necessarily, it's kind of like more TMZ-ish than football outsider-ish.
Yeah.
Why is Brandon Cooks traded every 20 minutes? He's a nice receiver. He puts up good numbers. He never gets to free agency. He always signs an extension with somebody, but after he's traded to them, what's the deal? Is he just a malingerer? Because the numbers look good on paper. When I watch him play, I go, that guy can make plays, but he continues to change teams. What's the deal with Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, the other thing is you never hear anything. There's nothing ever like, oh, well, here was an arrest or here was a
right. He's not on a police blotter.
No. Not at all. And like I've never gotten a coach or GM even like mumbly saying something bad about him. Now, what happened in Houston? There was a regime change last year. Okay, and there was an individual by the name of Jack Easterby who was kind of operating as showrunner for that team, sort of above the GM, below the ownership group, and he was a unique character. Let's put it that way. And all the scuttlebutt was that Brandon Cooks was like his guy, one of his guys. Okay. When the regime change happened, Cooks was not happy with that, was specifically not happy with that, and was also playing on a team that was very bad, has been very bad for a couple of years, didn't have outstanding quarterback play. So over the last year, it was clear that Cooks was not happy and was just a terrible fit where he was in Houston. That part we know. What I don't know is why it was so often before that teams were so eager to move on, because again, you never got like a real paper trail of why.
I think when Brandon does hang it up, I've argued, Mike, that he should sign a one-day contract with every team that traded for him and retire as the most traded player. Because this is baseball. I mean, trades like this don't happen in football, and he's been a very good player. It doesn't make sense on so many levels.
Yeah.
But I do think he's an improvement for the Cowboys, unfortunately for Eagles fans.
Exactly.
Do you have a bad contract for us when you look around and say, "Well, what the hell is this?"
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the off-ball linebackers, and that was one. Although when you really look at those deals, it's kind of like they're front-loaded. Like we just got money to burn right now, and we might as well bring in some dudes. I gotta pull it up right now. Mike McGlinchey was very good.
Mike,
very good
player, but
right tackle. And the Broncos bring him in 5 years, $87.5 million reported, $35 million fully guaranteed. And I'm looking at this, and the cap hits come in big. And this is a cap-strapped Broncos team that is trying to like build something around Russell Wilson, or maybe build for a future without Russell Wilson. And as soon as the McGlinchey signs this deal, Jerry Jeudy is like on the trade block, and everything we hear is receiver Jerry Judy's on the block. I've heard that Sutton might be on the block, the other receiver. So what are you doing? Super paying your right tackle and then rebuilding your receiving core. That's like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
I'm disappointed. I like George Payton, and I'm disappointed with what's going on. Now, part of it's getting things wrong with they got the coach wrong. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett was a disaster, but Payton was sort of like he was like a mini Eric DaCosta. He never left. He would get interview after interview, and he's saying, "I'm not leaving. I'm going to stick with Rick Spielman." Yeah. And for years, he had this great reputation. He finally goes, "All right, this is it. I'm going to take the Denver job," and it hasn't worked out. Oof.
Nice drafting, but although some of the draft picks have gotten
drafting, was good.
And you had this big whiff there. And the other thing is new ownership group in Denver. There's some people involved in that ownership group who sound like they're hands-on. Okay. Maybe some people who are used to having an incredible amount of power in this world who are going to be hands-on in that team. They who think they can order tanks and helicopters around. And now hang Russell Wilson around. So there's a little bit of friction there that seems to have impacted the coaching search for Sean Payton and maybe impacting things as well.
All right. I'm going to ask a similar question to John, but more specific on position. And that's good and bad contracts with quarterbacks. If we take Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo, put them on the side, they're brought in unquestionable to be their starters for their teams. Everyone else is at best competing for a job. Heineke in Atlanta and Dalton in Carolina hold down the fort if the rookie's not ready to play day number one. Yeah. Jacoby Brissett, Mike White, Case Keenum. Who did the best of the other quarterbacks, either pure backups, unquestioned backups, or they'll get a chance to compete. If they're the starter, they're only going to be the starter for a period of time before someone else takes over. Who contract-wise, who fit-wise do you think made a nice agreement and made a questionable agreement if you got one of each?
I'll go with the nice agreement. The Commanders bringing in Brissett. Brissett is better than Heineke because he's more reliable on a throw-by-throw basis. He's better than Carson Wentz because his head will be in the game for everything that he's being called upon to do. So they actually upgraded over last year's quarterbacks, and Brissett comes in, and again, he is a team-first winner mentality type of guy who comes into a team who has decent receivers and decent offensive line and has a great defensive lineup. I'm not saying the Commanders are a playoff team, but they're going to be tough outs, and it's not going to be that sort of jokey thing when you play the Commanders with Brissett there. So he could hold off Sam Howell. He could hold off a rookie, so to speak. Really, I don't think there's any really bad fits about that group. I will say the whole idea that, wherever Baker Mayfield goes, he brings this clickbait tendency with him, and he's going into Tampa. Folks, he's going into Tampa because Tampa is economizing, and they're just kicking tires randomly on a guy who had buzz, a year or two ago. The idea that he's going to rejuvenate his career at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and, sign a 6-year deal and be Brady's heir apparent. That's storytelling.
I'm seeing that, huh, Mike?
Yeah. At Mike Tanier, follow Mike on Twitter. Does a tremendous job at Football Outsiders. Contributor at the New York Times as well. So you can read Mike all over the place. I'll end up with the Eagles backup quarterback, Marcus Mariota. They finally did the deal, eight years, whatever the hell it was, late. But Marcus is finally here. What did you see from him last year? Obviously, it didn't end well in Atlanta. It's flamed out now twice as a starter. But looks like a solid backup in this league, and the Eagles always value that position.
Yeah, he looks like a solid backup who fits the system. Early in the season, Mariota was playing well within a very tight structure. And it became clearer and clearer as the weeks went on with the Falcons that he had to be very strictly within that structure, that the deep balls were not going to get down the field with any kind of real velocity, et cetera. And again, the biggest issue is when they went to Desmond Ridder, which he should have anticipated. Yeah. He did not handle it well and went AWOL. So he should be coming in with the proper mentality here. I think it's a fine pickup. I think he's a upgrade over Gardner Minshew in that position, frankly.
All right, here's a position that I know I share with my partner. We think of it the same. I want to get yours in it as well, because this is the lead up to the week with the owners and the competition committee putting forth potential rule changes, which will then go to vote. The one that's gotten the most attention, certainly here in Philadelphia, is the tush push. The can you use a secondary player to push a quarterback forward for a first down? John and I see this the same. A lot of Eagle fans are ticked off that they're even talking about this because Jalen Hurts was so good at it last year.
Right.
If they made it illegal, I think that would actually benefit the Eagles because their quarterback's still going to be able to get it because he's a beast. And other teams' quarterbacks aren't. How do you think they handled the tush push this offseason? Will it be re-ruled in the NFL?
I don't think they have the votes. And I think to get the votes, and you have to say there would have to be injury evidence. You know, all it taken was one injury where it was very clear that, like, oh, you pushed him and he hit his head. So unless they like preemptively say that that's a risk, I don't think they have the votes. And I don't look at it from an Eagles standpoint in this respect. I look at it from a football standpoint. I would rather see tush pushes than punts. Okay, and I would rather see defenses trying to be innovative somewhere along the way and say we're going to come up with a way to combat this. Than the idea that like, oh, it's legislated away. You don't have to worry about this sort of thing anymore. So I think it's interesting. I think teams should keep it. And I don't think right now there's enough votes to overturn it.
All right. When we get the vote, we vote for Mike Tanier, joining us anytime we can get him here on Birds 365. We appreciate you going black like the two hosts. Thank you much for that. Always good to see you, Mike. And we'll get you back up in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
FootballOutsiders.com. Check out the website. It's good analyst work, analysis, analytics as you're going to find out there these days. All right, he's Johnny Mac, Jody Mac. You know what we got to do? We got to come back. We've got to put a bow on the show. Wrap it up on Thursday next here on Birds 365.